My husband and his mother said, "You're just overreacting." But when she slapped me in public, I wiped my sweaty palms on my apron for the 100th time, surveying the gleaming kitchen of my soon-to-be-open diner. Everything had to be perfect. I poured my heart, soul, and life savings into this place. As I double-checked the walk-in fridge, my phone buzzed. Ava, my stomach clenched as I answered. "Charlotte, darling." Ava's syrupy voice oozed through the speaker. "I have the most wonderful news." I braced myself. "What is it, Ava?" "I've invited all my friends from the country club to your opening night. Won't that be marvelous?" My jaw dropped. All of them, Ava. That's too many people. "We're trying to keep it small, remember." She laughed, a tinkling sound that set my teeth on edge. "Oh, nonsense, the more the merrier. You should be thanking me for drumming up business." I pinched the bridge of my nose. "Ava, please, we have a strict guest list. I can't." "Charlotte." Thomas's voice boomed as he burst into the kitchen. "There you are. Mom just called. Isn't it great about her friends coming?" I stared at my husband, disbelief washing over me. "Thomas, we talked about this. We agreed on a small opening." He waved his hand dismissively. "Come on, honey, it'll be fine. Mom knows what she's doing." I felt a familiar tightness in my chest. "Put your mother on speakerphone," I said, my voice steely. Thomas complied, looking confused. "Ava," I said, fighting to keep my tone even, "I appreciate your enthusiasm, but we simply can't accommodate all your friends. The guest list is set." "But Charlotte," Ava countered, "these are very influential people. Think of the connections you'll make." "Yeah, honey," Thomas chimed in, "it could be great for business." I closed my eyes, counting to 10. When I opened them, both Thomas and Ava were silent, waiting. "No," I said firmly. "I'm sorry, but no. This is my restaurant, my opening night. I've planned every detail, and I won't have it derailed at the last minute." Ava's voice turned frosty. "I see. Well, I suppose I'll just have to tell everyone the sad news. Such a shame, really, after all we've done for you." The line went dead. Thomas gaped at me, his face a mix of shock and disappointment. "Charlotte, how could you?" That was my mother. I squared my shoulders. "Thomas, this is my dream, our dream, remember? I need your support, not." The kitchen door swung open, and my sous chef, Noah, poked his head in. "Chef, we've got a problem with the produce delivery. They're short on the heirloom tomatoes." I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and nodded. "I'll be right there." Turning back to Thomas, I said, "We'll discuss this later. Right now, I have a restaurant to run." As I followed Noah out, I heard Thomas mutter, "Mom's not going to like this." I paused in the doorway, my hand on the frame. Without turning around, I said, "Then maybe it's time your mother learns she can't always get what she wants." The door swung shut behind me, leaving Thomas alone in the kitchen. As I strode towards the loading dock, my mind raced. This was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, the culmination of years of hard work and sacrifice. Instead, I felt like I was walking a tightrope, trying to balance my dreams against the weight of my husband's family's expectations. But as I stepped out into the crisp Connecticut air, I straightened my spine. This was my moment, my restaurant, and come hell or high water, I was going to make it work, with or without Ava's approval. The day after my confrontation with Ava, I found myself elbow-deep in prep work for the restaurant's soft opening. As I chopped vegetables with practiced precision, my mind wandered to the countless times I bent over backward to accommodate my in-laws' extravagant demands. The kitchen door swung open, and Thomas sauntered in, looking sheepish. "Hey, honey, got a minute?" I set down my knife, wiping my hands on my apron. What is it, Thomas? He shuffled his feet, not quite meeting my eyes. So Mom called again. She feels terrible about yesterday and wants to make it up to us. I raised an eyebrow, skeptical. Oh, and how does she plan to do that? Thomas's face brightened. She's offering to host a pre-opening cocktail party at her country club. Isn't that great? My heart sank. Thomas, we can't afford. Don't worry about that, he interrupted, waving his hand dismissively. Mom says she'll cover everything. It's her way of apologizing. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath. And what's the catch, Thomas? He looked confused. Catch? There's no catch. It's just Mom being generous. I let out a bitter laugh. Thomas, your mother has never done anything without strings attached. Remember our wedding. His brow furrowed. What about our wedding? She insisted on paying for it, then held it over our heads for years. Every time she wanted something, she'd bring up how much she spent on our perfect day. Thomas's face fell. Come on, Charlotte, that's not fair. Mom's just trying to help. I turned back to my prep work, my knife hitting the cutting board with more force than necessary. Like she helped with the down payment on our house, or how she helped by lending us her car when ours broke down. What are you talking about? Thomas asked, his voice rising. I spun around, pointing my knife at him accusingly. Every time your mother helped Sue end up paying for it tenfold the house, she made us repay her with interest. The car she insisted we offer her around for months. Thomas's face reddened. That's ridiculous. Mom would never. Open your eyes, Thomas. I shouted, slamming my palm on the counter. Your mother is manipulating us, and you're too blind to see it. The kitchen fell silent, save for the hum of the refrigerators. Thomas stared at me, his mouth agape. I need some air, he muttered, turning on his heel and storming out of the kitchen. I leaned against the counter, my hands shaking as I tried to steady my breathing. My phone buzzed. A text from Ava. Charlotte, darling, I do hope you'll reconsider the cocktail party. It would mean so much to me and Henry, after all we've done for you and Thomasori. I gripped the phone tightly, my knuckles turning white. Before I could stop myself, I'd hit the call button. Ava answered on the first ring. Charlotte, how lovely to hear from you, she said. Ava, I said, my voice cold. I appreciate the offer, but we won't be needing a cocktail party. But dear, she interrupted, let's not be hasty. I'd hate for anything to go wrong on your big night. You know how these things can be unpredictable. A chill ran down my spine. What are you saying? Oh, nothing, dear, just that it would be a shame if, say, the health inspector found any irregularities, or if your liquor license suddenly had issues. My blood ran cold. You wouldn't dare. Ava's laugh was like ice. Wouldn't I? Think carefully, Charlotte. You need us more than you know. The line went dead. I stood there, phone in hand, as the implications of her threat sank in. Thomas had been taking money from his parents behind my back. Our dream, my restaurant, was built on a foundation of lies and manipulation. As I looked around the kitchen, my sanctuary, I realized that nothing was as it seemed. And as the soft opening loomed ever closer, I knew that this was just the beginning of my troubles. I stormed into our bedroom, where Thomas was lounging on the bed, scrolling through his phone. We need to talk, I said, my voice trembling with barely contained anger. Thomas looked up, startled. What's wrong? Your mother just told me about the investment you two made in the restaurant. I spat, care to explain. His face paled. Charlotte, I can explain. Save it, I cut him off. How could you go behind my back like this? This was supposed to be our dream, Thomas, our restaurant. He sat up, running a hand through his hair. I didn't have a choice. We were running out of money, and Mom offered to help. I laughed bitterly. And it didn't occur to you to tell me your wife your partner. Thomas's eyes flashed with defiance. Well, someone had to do something. You were so caught up in your little chef fantasy that you couldn't see we were drowning. His words hit me like a slap. My little chef fantasy? Is that what you think this is? Come on, Charlotte, he scoffed. You're opening a high-end restaurant in the middle of a recession. It's not exactly a sound business plan. I stared at him, barely recognizing the man before me. What happened to you, Thomas? You used to believe in me and us. His shoulders sagged. Reality happened, Charlotte. I lost my job, remember? Yeah, I remember. I said, my voice hard. I also remember you promising to find another one. How's that job search going? Thomas's face reddened. It's not that simple. The market's tough right now. Really, I challenged, because I seem to recall you turning down 3 job offers in the past month. He looked away, avoiding my gaze. They weren't the right fit. No, I said, realization dawning. They just weren't as cushy as your old job. You were not looking for work, Thomas. You were waiting for someone to hand you the perfect position on a silver platter. Thomas stood up, his fists clenched. That's not fair. I've been supporting your dream this whole time. I laughed humorlessly. Supporting me by lying to Meppy, taking money from your mother behind my back. I did what I had to do, he shouted. Someone had to be practical. Practical? I shot back. Was it practical to lie to your wife, to undermine everything we've worked for? Thomas's face crumpled. I was trying to help. No, I said, my voice quiet but firm. You were trying to control me, just like your mother does. Well, I'm done being controlled, I said, turning to leave. But Thomas grabbed my arm. Charlotte, wait, please. We can figure this out. I shook off his grip. There's nothing to figure out, Thomas. You made your choice. Now I'm making mine. As I walked out of the bedroom, I heard Thomas call after me. What's that supposed to mean? I paused at the door, not turning around. It means I'm done, Thomas. With your lies, with your mother's manipulation, with all of it. I'm going to make my restaurant work, with or without you. I slammed the door behind me, my heart pounding as I leaned against the wall, trying to catch my breath. My phone buzzed. A text from my sous chef, Noah. Chef, we've got a problem. The health inspector just showed up for a surprise visit. He's asking to see you ASAP. I closed my eyes, fighting back tears of frustration. Of course, this would happen now. I took a deep breath, straightened my spine, and headed for the door. I had a restaurant to save, a dream to protect. As I drove to the restaurant, my mind raced. How had everything fallen apart so quickly? The man I married, the one who had swept me off my feet with his charm and ambition, seemed like a distant memory. In his place was a stranger, content to ride on my coattails and his mother's money. I pulled into the parking lot, steeling myself for the battle ahead. As I walked towards the entrance, I caught sight of my reflection in the window. Despite everything, I looked determined, fierce even. You've got this, Charlotte, I whispered to myself. It's time to take control of your own story. With that, I pushed open the door, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. My restaurant, my rules, and no one, not Thomas, not Ava, not even a surprise health inspection, was going to stand in my way. The day of the restaurant's opening loomed before me like a storm cloud on the horizon. I stood in the kitchen, surrounded by the hum of appliances and the faint aroma of herbs, trying to quell the anxiety churning in my stomach. Chef Noah's voice broke through my reverie. The final shipment of wine just arrived. Where do you want it? I blinked, forcing myself back to the present. Right, let's go check it out. As we walked to the storage area, I couldn't shake the feeling of impending doom. Ava's threat about her investment still echoed in my mind, and Thomas's betrayal stung like an open wound. We were halfway through inventory when my phone buzzed. Ava's name flashed on the screen. I hesitated, then answered. "Charlotte, darling," Ava's saccharine voice oozed through the speaker. "I hope you've reconsidered our little chat. The opening is tomorrow, after all." I gripped the phone tighter. "Ava, I've told you." Now, she interrupted. "Let's not be hasty. I'd hate for anything to go wrong on your big night. You know how these things can be unpredictable." A chill ran down my spine. "What are you saying?" "Oh, nothing, dear. Just that it would be a shame if, say, the health inspector found any irregularities, or if your liquor license suddenly had issues." My blood ran cold. "You wouldn't dare." Ava's laugh was like ice. "Wouldn't I? Think carefully, Charlotte. You need us more than you know." The line went dead. I stood there, frozen, as the implications of her threat sank in. Could Ava really sabotage the opening? Would she go that far? And if she did, what could I do to stop her? Hours later, I found myself alone in the dining room, surrounded by meticulously set tables and soft ambient lighting. This was my dream, the culmination of years of hard work and sacrifice. And now, on the eve of its realization, it all felt like it was slipping through my fingers. The door chimed, and I looked up to see Thomas walk in. His face was a mask of concern and guilt. "Charlotte," he started, "we need to talk." I sighed, suddenly feeling every one of my 38 years. "About what, Thomas?" "Your lies. Your mother's threats." He flinched. "I know I messed up, but Mom, she means well. She just wants to help." I laughed bitterly. "Help by threatening to sabotage the opening. Some help." Thomas's eyes widened. "What? She wouldn't." "Wake up, Thomas," I snapped. "Your mother is trying to control us, to own us, and you're letting her." He ran a hand through his hair, looking lost. "What do you want me to do?" I stared at him, really looked at him, and for the first time, I saw not the confident man I'd fallen in love with, but a scared boy still clinging to his mother's apron strings. "I want you to choose, Thomas," I said quietly. "Me or her. Our life or hers. Because I can't do this anymore. I won't." Thomas's face crumpled. "Charlotte, please, don't make me choose." "That's the problem, isn't it?" I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "You already have." I turned away, unable to bear the sight of him any longer. "I think you should go, Thomas. I have a restaurant to open tomorrow." "Charlotte," he repeated, his voice firm. I heard his footsteps retreat. The door chime signaled his exit, and in that moment, standing alone in the restaurant of my dreams, I made a decision. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I'd hoped never to use. "Henry," I said when the line connected. "It's Charlotte. We need to talk about your wife." As I hung up, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. Tomorrow wasn't just the opening of my restaurant. It was the beginning of my liberation. And come hell or high water, I was going to see it through. The night of the restaurant opening arrived with a palpable tension in the air. I stood in the kitchen, surveying my team as they bustled about, preparing for the onslaught of guests. Despite my resolve, my hands trembled slightly as I adjusted my chef's coat. Chef Noah called out, "Ava and her entourage just arrived. They're demanding to be seated immediately." I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and nodded. "I'll handle it." As I stepped into the dining room, I was met with the sight of Ava, resplendent in an ostentatious gown, surrounded by a flock of equally overdressed women. Thomas hovered nervously at her side, looking lost in his ill-fitting suit. "Charlotte, darling." Ava's voice rang out, sickeningly sweet. "We're simply famished. I do hope you've prepared something special for us." I plastered on a smile. Of course, Ava, right this way. As I led them to their table, I could feel the eyes of my other guests upon us. This was not how I'd envisioned my opening night. Once seated, Ava waved her hand dismissively. We'll have the chef's tasting menu, of course, and do make sure the wine is flowing freely. I gritted my teeth. Certainly. I'll have your first course out shortly. As I turned to leave, Ava grabbed my wrist. Oh, and Charlotte, I took the liberty of inviting a few more friends. I do hope that's not a problem. My fake smile faltered. How many more, Ava? She laughed airily. Oh, just a dozen or so. They should be arriving any minute. I felt the blood drain from my face. We were already at capacity. There was no way we could accommodate more guests, let alone serve them for free. Ava, I said, my voice low and dangerous. We need to talk. I led her to a quiet corner of the restaurant, away from prying eyes and ears. This ends now, I hissed. I won't have you sabotaging my opening night with your games. Ava's eyes narrowed. Games? I'm simply trying to help, dear. After all, without our investment. What investment? I snapped. The money you claim to have given us. The money Thomas has been too ashamed to tell me about. Ava's face paled slightly. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't play dumb, Ava, I said. I know all about your so-called help. I spoke to Henry. At the mention of her husband's name, Ava's composure cracked. You had no right. I had every right, I interrupted. This is my restaurant, my dream, and I won't let you destroy it with your lies and manipulation. Ava's eyes flashed dangerously. Be careful, Charlotte. You have no idea what I'm capable of. Oh, I think I do, I retorted. But here's what you don't know. I've got copies of all the financial records. Every penny that's gone into this place, and there's not a trace of your money anywhere. Ava's face contorted with rage. You ungrateful little. Save it. I cut her off. Here's what's going to happen. You and your friends will pay for your meals like everyone else. And after tonight, you'll stay out of my business and my life. Or I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of person you really are. For a moment, Ava stood there seething. Then, without warning, she raised her hand and slapped me hard across the face. The restaurant fell silent. I could feel every eye on us, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Slowly, I turned back to face Ava, my cheek stinging, but my resolve stronger than ever. Get out, I said, my voice low but firm. Your friends, all of you, get out of my restaurant now. Ava opened her mouth to protest, but Thomas stepped forward, placing a hand on her arm. Mom, I think it's time we left. As they turned to go, I caught Thomas's eye. The look we shared spoke volumes. This wasn't just about the restaurant anymore. This was the end of everything. Once they were gone, I turned to face my stunned staff and guests, taking a deep breath. I straightened my spine and said, my apologies for the disturbance. Please enjoy your evening. The next round of drinks is on the house. As the murmur of conversation slowly resumed, I retreated to the kitchen, my mind racing. I'd won this battle, but the war was far from over. And as I picked up my knife and returned to my station, I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The aftermath of Ava's dramatic exit left me reeling, but I had no time to process it. The restaurant was in full swing, and I had to keep my focus on the kitchen. As I plated dish after dish, my mind raced with the implications of what had just happened. Hours later, as the last guest trickled out, I finally allowed myself to breathe. The opening night had been a success, despite Ava's best efforts to derail it. But I knew this was far from over. As if on cue, my phone buzzed. A text from Thomas. We need to talk. I'm coming over. I sighed, bracing myself for another confrontation. When Thomas arrived, his face was a mask of conflicting emotions: anger, confusion, and something that looked suspiciously like guilt. "What the hell was that about, Charlotta?" he demanded. "How could you humiliate my mother like that?" I laughed bitterly. "Humiliate her, Thomas? She tried to sabotage our opening night. She threatened me, manipulated us, and you're worried about her feelings." Thomas's face reddened. She was just trying to help, and now she's refusing to pay for anything. "Do you know how much money we've lost?" My blood ran cold. "What do you mean, how much money we've lost, Thomas? What aren't you telling me?" He looked away, unable to meet my eyes. "Mom, she's been covering a lot of our expenses. More than I told you." The room seemed to spin. "How much more, Thomas?" He mumbled something inaudible. "How much, Thomas?" I demanded. "Almost everything," he shouted. "The renovations, the equipment, even the first month's rent. We're in debt, Charlotte, debt up to our eyeballs. And now she's threatening to call it all in." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Everything I'd worked for, everything I'd sacrificed, it was all built on a lie. "Get out," I whispered. Thomas looked stunned. "What?" "Get out," I screamed, my voice raw with emotion. "I can't even look at you right now." As the door slammed behind him, I collapsed onto a chair, my mind reeling. How had I let things get this far? How had I been so blind? With shaking hands, I pulled out my phone and dialed Henry's number. It was late, but I didn't care. This ended now. "Charlotte," Henry's groggy voice answered. "What's wrong?" "Your wife," I said, my voice trembling with barely contained rage. "She's threatening to ruin everything. I need your help, Henry. Please, please." There was a long pause. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. True to his word, Henry arrived at the restaurant, looking disheveled but alert. I quickly filled him in on everything: Ava's threats, Thomas's deception, the mountain of debt we were drowning in. Henry listened silently, his face growing grimmer with each revelation. When I finished, he let out a long, weary sigh. "I'm so sorry, Charlotte," he said. "I had no idea it had gotten this bad. Ava, she's always been manipulative, but this is beyond the pale." "What can we do?" I asked, hating how desperate I sounded. Henry's eyes hardened with resolve. "Leave it to me. I'll handle Ava and the money. You focus on keeping this place running." As he turned to leave, I called out, "Why are you helping me?" He paused at the door, a sad smile on his face. "Because someone needs to stand up to her, and because you remind me of myself years ago, before I let Ava take control of everything." After Henry left, I sat alone in the darkened restaurant, surrounded by the remnants of my dream. Everything I'd worked for was hanging by a thread, and I had no idea if it would survive the night. But as I looked around at the gleaming kitchen, the carefully set tables, I felt a spark of determination ignite within me. This was my restaurant, my dream, and I'd be damned if I let Ava or anyone else take it away from me. With newfound resolve, I stood up and grabbed my phone. It was time to fight fire with fire. If Ava wanted a war, she was going to get one. The next morning, I arrived at the restaurant early, my nerves frayed, but my resolve stronger than ever. As I unlocked the door, I noticed a sleek black car pull up. Henry stepped out, his face grim but determined. "Charlotte," he greeted me, his voice low. "We need to talk. Inside." Henry laid out the harsh reality of our situation. "I've managed to freeze Ava's access to our accounts, but the damage is done. She's been siphoning money for years, not just for your restaurant." My heart sank. How bad is it? Henry's eyes met mine, filled with a mix of anger and regret. Bad enough that I've involved our lawyer. But that's my battle to fight right now. We need to focus on saving your restaurant." Just then, the door burst open. Ava stormed in, her face contorted with rage, Thomas trailing behind her like a lost puppy. "How dare you?" She screeched at Henry, cutting me off like some common criminal. Henry stood his ground, his voice cold. "That's exactly what you are, Ava, a criminal. And it stops now." Ava's eyes darted between Henry and me, realization dawning. She hissed at me. "You turned my husband against me." I stood my ground. "No, Ava. You did that all on your own." Thomas stepped forward, his face pale. "Mom, what's going on?" "What are they talking about?" Ava's composure cracked. "It's nothing, darling, just a misunderstanding." "Stop lying," Ava Henry interrupted. "Thomas, your mother, has been embezzling money for years. The funds she claimed to invest in this restaurant, all stolen." Thomas's face crumpled. "Mom, is this true?" Ava's denial died on her lips as Henry produced a stack of documents. "It's all here, Thomas. Every transaction, every lie." As Thomas absorbed the truth, his shoulders sagged. He turned to me, his eyes pleading. "Charlotte, I swear I didn't know. You have to believe me." I wanted to believe him, but the weight of his betrayal was too heavy. "Even if that's true, Thomas, you still lied to me about the money, about your job. How can I ever trust you again?" As she reaches the door, she pauses. "Your restaurant, it's beautiful. You've done well, Charlotte. I'm proud of you." With that, she's gone, leaving me standing in the middle of my thriving restaurant, surrounded by the life I've built for myself. Lucas appears at my side, Isabella in his arms. "Everything okay?" I look at him, at our daughter, at the bustling restaurant around us. "Yes," I say, a smile spreading across my face. "Everything is perfect." As we walk back to the kitchen together, I feel a sense of completion. The journey has been hard, filled with betrayal and heartache, but it led me here, to this moment, this life, this family of my own making. The critic is waiting, my team is ready, and a new chapter is about to begin. But this time, I'm facing it on my own terms, surrounded by love and support that I never have to question. I tie on my apron, pick up my knife, and step into my domain. "All right, team, let's make some magic."